Hello, my dear storytellers. It is Wednesday. I'm Mary Rose Wood, and we're back to do a little bit of live chat, Q&A, and just exploration together about story structure and writing craft. I'm here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. If you are watching on YouTube, hello. And if you're watching on Facebook, please go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give me permission to show your name. Well, let me just say a big hello to whoever is here. And I just want to do a special shout out to Roslyn, who is not only here, but ready for change. That is what it's all about today. So we're all about change. I just got like a wonderful kind of frog in my throat just at the moment that we went live. So give me a moment to hydrate and take a moment to hydrate as well. And if you can drink from a mason jar, then you can be a hipster like me. This is what makes us feel good, right? These identifying traits that we have. I think identity is one of the things we're going to talk about today, because when we talk about change, we talk about identity. You know, what is it? What does it mean when you change from drinking your Pellegrino seltzer out of a plastic cup to decide that from now on I'm only going to drink it out of a glass mason jar with a sprig of mint in it? You know, have you changed anything substantially on the inside? Maybe you're trying to, right? Sometimes we try to signal change by changing our exterior details. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So hello, everyone who's here. Welcome back. And I'm going to definitely want to hear from you as this talk meanders through the topic of change. First, I want to share guilty pleasure. Nothing like sharing a guilty pleasure, right? And I'm not really guilty about it. I don't feel guilty about most things. So, but it's something that's new to me. And it's because I learned a lot more about YouTube in the past couple of months that I've been going live every week. I wasn't spending a lot of time on YouTube before then. But now that I go on YouTube and I have a YouTube channel, naturally I'm curious about YouTube. And so I look around, and do you guys know what's on YouTube? Makeup tutorials, hair makeovers, people critiquing, sent in videos of how people did their home haircuts. There is a treasure trove of this kind of makeover stuff on YouTube. People teaching you how to fix your hair differently, how to put on your makeup differently. And I started to watch some of these channels because they're so fun. Also, they're fun, but I watch them, with an eye toward why are these so compelling? Why do we like them so much? Why are there so many of them? Why do they have millions of subscribers and followers? And then I thought about some of the shows that are on cable that have been huge hits, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and home makeover shows, and all of the ways that the process of changing the way you currently are into something much better gets turned into a story that the audience can enjoy. Why is it so hypnotic? Now, whether you wear makeup or not, you probably live in a house. Maybe you've come across, this show. There's a big show on Netflix now called The Home Edit, where these two lovely young women go in to people's closets and garages and living rooms and playrooms, and they transform the clutter into order. There's a state of being at the beginning of the show, and then there's a very, very different state of being at the end of the show. You watch a beauty makeover on YouTube, and a perfectly ordinary looking person is presented speaking to the camera saying, I'm here because, I'm going through a hard time in my life. Maybe a relationship ended, or my kids grew up and left, and I'm not feeling my best. I feel like I need something to pick me up. I thought that a makeover would be great, and then, cut to at the end of the day in the salon, she's got a new hair color and a new haircut. She's been fully glammed up. They've coached her on what to wear. It looks like a different person. And the excitement is palpable, not only for the person who's gone through the change, but for the people who are watching. So I've laid out my thesis here that change is in and of itself thrilling, not only to the person who goes through it, but to the audience. If that were not so, we would not have so many shows like this. Now, if anybody wants to leave a comment about why you think that is, that would be wonderful. I would love to know why you think it is. And do you personally find these types of stories entertaining? Right? I mean, whether you personally do or not, we have to admit that millions and millions of people do. So now let's pivot this question a little bit to writing. I have said, and you'll always hear me say, that story is practically a synonym for change. We build a story to delineate, to demonstrate the process of change. And we do that because that's what the reader requires in order to feel satisfied. If you've ever read a tale in which there were many events, many things happened, perhaps. There were a lot of pages with a lot of words on them. But you got halfway in, or maybe you didn't make it that far, and had the feeling that, yeah, but nothing's really happening. Or maybe you actually got finished the book and had that sense of, yeah, it didn't go anywhere. Nothing really happened. It wasn't that satisfying. What you're actually describing is that the journey of change, the transformation, the amount of transformation or the meaning of the transformation was just insufficient. It was unsatisfactory. So, let's go back to our beauty makeover comparison. If somebody, with tears in her eyes tells the camera, I've been through a rough time. I let myself, I just sort of stopped caring. I haven't been out for a while and I don't feel good about myself right now. I want to feel better about myself. So I'm here for the makeover. And then, cut to, and she comes out and she looks, maybe exactly the same. She wouldn't be thrilled. And we as viewers would be disappointed. Like, where was the makeover? We came for the makeover. We want to see the change, and we want to see significant change. It's what makes us feel satisfied. All right. Now I want to let's dig into this a little bit. I mean, I really love the beauty makeover image here, because I think it takes a little bit of the burden of talking about the abstraction of how to be a good writer and what's a good story and how to craft a plot. Like, let's just put all that aside and be super basic. Let's just be very human about this at the moment. When those stories are told, and the makeover stories are told, you don't meet the before version of the person and hear them say, you know what? I'm actually fine. I'm great. I love everything about my life. Love the way I look. I'm just here on a lark. I mean, good. I mean, that's a great way to, to feel satisfied with your life. It's great. Is that person's makeover story going to be like as gripping and as satisfying as the person who says, I'm here because I'm on my last nerve. I am so sick of myself. I don't know what to do. I don't want to feel this bad anymore. I don't want to feel so uninteresting. I know there's more to me than the way I'm presenting myself to the world right now. But I just, I've been overwhelmed. I've been through trouble. I've been through hard times. I really need a boost. I really want to feel better. I want the world to, and this doesn't mean self-loathing. Someone might say, I want the world to see me with the same vibrancy that I feel within myself, but I know that I'm not presenting it, right? We can all relate to these feelings, right? They're very human, very human. Even if most days you feel like, no, I'm rocking it, there are going to be days that you feel like, you know what? My light is a little hid under a bushel today. I wish I could show it more, but it's not always so easy, right? So it's the stories of the person who comes in saying, you know what, I recognize that I'm not at my best and I would like to be. I really would like to be. That makeover, like, we're like rooting for her. We're like, oh my gosh, I hope they make her look amazing. And we stay tuned, right? We stay tuned. We want to know, how far can they take this? The further they take it, the more satisfied we are. I mean, no lie, I used to cry actual tears at the end of some of those Queer Eye for the Straight Guy shows. I would be so moved because the people themselves would be so moved. They would be like a mirror would be held up to them by the experts at the end that would demonstrate to them, to the person who had just undergone this like total transformation. It usually the reflection in that mirror so surpassed any vision of themselves that that person brought into it, that they are now in a state almost of shock, saying, I didn't know that that was in me. I didn't know I could look so good. I didn't know my house could be so beautiful. I didn't know that my garage could be so tidy. I didn't know that, such a great dinner could be prepared out of the ordinary ingredients in my fridge. Like whatever your makeover of choice is, they all they all work this way. They work in this sense of elevation and surprise and reflecting back to the hero of the story, who's the person undergoing the change, that, in the words of Gandalf, there is more to you than meets the eye. And so these wonderful, stylists, declutterers, makeup artists, hair colorists, whoever, fashion consultants, anybody who's in this field, in this little field of helping people, right, manifest a greater version of themselves, they are all pouring mentor energy into the mix. They are holding space for the hero in question to have a vision of themselves that is so much greater than they originally knew, than they originally perceived. So it's not a guilty pleasure at all. It is a fascinating example of storytelling energy at work in real life. Now, I want to share a comment that Rosalind has posted because it's exactly where I want to go next with this. So Rosalind has shared, I'm fascinated with how external change expresses internal change. Exactly. Or how sometimes the reverse, how internal change causes something different to show externally. Right on the money, Rosalind. So this is really where we storytellers can learn a lot from these makeover shows, because what they are doing is they are bringing the external manifestation of that person's true nature into alignment with the best of them on the inside. Getting a great haircut and a professional, a makeup application is going to make anybody look amazing, right? It's where glamour comes from. It's going to make anyone sort of fit the label, the cultural label. Oh, you look incredible. Well, of course they look incredible. They've been worked on by professionals, and that's what we culturally tend to define, right, as the kind of like, the kind of appearance worth commenting on. Lots of people with simple hair and no makeup look incredible, but it's not that, that makeover excitement, right? That's part of the game. It's part of the playfulness of all of that, playing with appearance. And we do it because there is this link that Rosalind notes between the internal state and the external presentation. The person comes wanting to look better, yes, but wanting to feel differently. They want that shift in identity. They don't want to think, I'm just, ordinary. The best is in the past. I'm just biding my time till retirement. They don't want to feel small. They don't want to feel plain. They don't want to feel invisible. They don't want to feel overlooked. These are the emotions that a lot of the folks who come for makeover bring into the room at first. They want to feel vibrant. They want people to see them again. They want to feel visible, They want to feel comfortable in a changed identity if they've gone from being married to being single, from married to being widowed, from a parent to an empty nester. These are the threshold crossings of life that force us to grapple with our identity, our sense of self, our sense of who we are in the world, our sense of purpose. And you know where I'm going if you've been watching these videos, your sense of mission. What is it that you're here to do? Is it important? Does it matter? Does anybody care whether you accomplish it or not? Are there any stakes? You see, once again, like life and storytelling are sort of running on the same energetic tracks. So the people come asking for external transformation, but wanting internal shifts. And it is a dance. Just as Rosalind points out, it is a dance that goes both ways. You know, sometimes you get that advice, fake it till you make it. Act as if. This is not a terrible advice. This is actually quite useful advice in certain circumstances. If you want to, shift your identity, if you want to change careers, if you want to put yourself out in the world and step into leadership of some kind, inspire others, let your views be heard, you might be very frightened on the inside. You may feel still unworthy. You may still feel not ready. You may not have all the confidence you need, but sometimes you just need to start before you're ready and act as if, and trust that in the doing, you will learn what you need to know to be it, right? And then, so it's not bad advice. It's not bad advice. Being a charlatan, I don't recommend, right? Selling snake oil, I don't recommend. But sometimes we need to, in fact, often we need to start before we're ready. Start before we've got it all worked out inside. If we wait until we've got it all sorted out inside, we'll never begin. This is true of life, and it's true for you writers. It's true for all of us as we contemplate putting words on a blank page and feeling that we're going to start a journey that we're going to be able to finish. It's a leap of faith. We have to act as if. We have to act as if we're ready to do it, that we know how to do it, because there's so many things that we won't learn until we're on the journey. Sounds like the hero of a story, doesn't it? Well, you are the hero of your own life story. There's no other way to think of it. So sometimes we have to change our outward behavior, our outward appearance, our outward conditions in order to push our internal transformation along, right? And then inevitably, when things change on the inside, things change on the outside. When we get higher self-esteem, when we learn to see the world more clearly, all of a sudden we look around and we say, hey, this doesn't suit me at all. I need a better environment. I need a better job. I need better companions. I need an adventure of some kind. When our identity shifts, our external circumstances almost inevitably and organically want to shift as well. Did you ever go through a phase? Speaking of decluttering your closet, did you ever go through a phase where you bought prairie dresses for a year and cowboy boots and a hat and you looked adorable? And then one day you woke up and you looked at the prairie dresses and you said, where are my leather pants? Like, where's my silk blouse and, gold jewelry? Like, I'm an urban sophisticate. This isn't me. I'm something different than this. Or maybe I would like to try to be something different than this. And then all those clothes go in the donation bag, and then you buy all new clothes. You are changing your external presentation because you have had a shift in identity, or you want to shift in identity. So Rosalind, you raised the very core point of this talk, which is that there is this dynamic going back and forth between the internal state and the external presentation of that state, both physically and environmentally, right? Relationally, all of the things will be affected. What do we do with this golden nugget of insight as storytellers? Well, you know what we do. We put our heroes on a journey of a meaningful change. We establish what's wrong at the very beginning in the first act of our story, right? We establish what's wrong. Think of that lovely lady at the beginning of the makeover transformation YouTube channel video who's sitting there humbly, barefaced, her hair not yet styled or washed, telling the camera, I really need a boost. I've been through a rough time. I want to feel better. I feel like I need a fresh start. Something's got to, I want things to be better. It's an internal state. She wants to change her internal state. She's in the first act of her story and she's telling us what's wrong. I just don't want to go on like this anymore. I really need a change. And she does what a hero does in the first act. She recognizes on some level, this is a hero who volunteered for the adventure, of course. And in our stories, this won't be true of every hero. But this particular gal has volunteered for the makeover. She's here. Maybe somebody bought it for her as a gift, but she still showed up. She's probably nervous. She might be asked, what are you nervous about? And she'll be like, oh, I'm nervous he's going to cut my hair too short. I'm nervous that my husband won't like it. She's got threshold guardian energy for days. She's got internal refusal for days. She's there. She has showed up for the adventure, but she is still contemplating all her refusal. It's not too late. It's not too late to get up and go, And where you really see the refusal energy is when they get ushered into the chair and the hairstylist says, well, how short are you willing to go? Have you ever thought about being a blonde? And the woman starts to cry and she'll be like, no, I don't. I've worn it. And he'll say, how long have you worn this hair this way? And the answer is inevitably 20 years. Right? We talk about storytelling, about characters who are like stuck in a condition that is just, they've outgrown it. It's not working for them anymore. It's time to change. It's time to grow, be more, grow up, try something, right? It's a woman who's worn her hair the same way for 20 years or 30 years, she's in that chair and the scissors are right here waiting. This is the adventure right here, right? And then off it goes. The external is changed with a snip. And now the adventure has begun. There's no turning back. I mean, the hair will grow back, but for our purposes, the adventure has irrevocably begun. She's out there, right, with her. Now she's lost a foot of hair and who knows what she'll be. Maybe she'll be a redhead with curls, maybe, all kinds of things. But this is what happens. In the first act, it's not okay. There's a stuckness. There's something that needs to shift. And it's for the hero's benefit. It's for the hero's benefit. And so there's a mentor figure who makes it possible, who says, look, trust me. Are you willing to let me do what I think will look best? Or do you want me to just give you a bang trim and send you home? And when he puts it that way, the woman says, well, if you just give me a bang trim and send me home, then that is a real refusal of the call, isn't it? That's an insufficient transformation. She waited months for the appointment. She's probably spent a lot of money to be there. She's going to go home with a bang trim? No, of course she isn't. Eventually, the mentor energy is going to get her to say, okay, just don't cut it too short. And then we see what happens. But you see how it plays out. It starts with this quality of needing something to shift. There is refusal. There is complexity. We get to learn to know the hero's nature by the way they describe their refusal. We get to know how anxious they are. We get to know what's holding them back. We get to know why they're clinging to their poofy perm from the 80s. Why hasn't that changed? All you got to do is ask a couple of little questions and the whole story comes pouring out. And by the time it's done, we viewers, the audience, those of us who are taking the journey vicariously, just as your readers take the journey of your hero vicariously by reading your story, we're so invested. We want her to be happy about it. We're a little anxious too, because what if she freaks out? What if he does cut it too short and she really resists it? And then she's cries and wants to go home in a wig. I mean, that could happen. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. Most of the time, the hero goes through a lot of emotions and in the end is glad that they went on the adventure, right? But that second act is a dance between internal and external change. So I see some really fun comments here. Let's see what is Rosalind saying about Gandalf. Yeah. Yeah, let me just show this, Rosin. It's really great. Gandalf's words lead to another thing about change in stories that I like, when the protagonist does not know the changes they need and then sets out and discovers both what is in them and what they can become. Exactly. Exactly. Many a hero, and I would imagine it might even be fair to say most heroes, at the beginning of a story do not and cannot have a complete vision of everything that they need because they're not there yet. They are still in a semi-unconscious state. They are still a little stuck with their haircut from the 80s. They're still a little afraid of what their loved ones are going to think if they come home as a platinum blonde instead of the mousy brown hair that they've had all their lives. They're still one foot in the old, and they haven't even embraced the journey of the new. And it's as they embrace the journey of the new that their sense of themselves and their capacity will continually expand, but not all at once, in tiny steps. And that is why the second act of any story is the most of it. It's about 50%, rough numbers, but most of your story is this second act journey of change. And so what I want to bring to you guys is an awareness that all through that second act, the makeover is ongoing, right? It's not something that is hidden and then is unveiled at the end like a big surprise. We get to see it. We, meaning the reader, get to see the makeover as it's happening. We get to see it beat by beat, scene by scene. In the Path of the Storyteller training that I offer, we call it the tests of the second act. So it's test by test. And how do we do this dance of internal transformation shown by external manifestation? Well, here's where storytellers get to be inventive. You yourself are going to come up with the ways that this change is demonstrated. And in story, as in life, we know people by what they say, what they do, how they present themselves, what other people say about them, the choices that they make. You know, we don't go up to people and say, "Tell me what to think of you." We form our own opinions based on all of the evidence. And the evidence, think about what I just said. It's speech, behavior, choices. What gets demonstrated? Everything about their values. Are they kind or are they not kind? Are they brave or not brave? Are they willing to sacrifice or are they not? Are they, funny? Are they uh, maudlin, or do they prefer to play the victim? Are they sociable, not sociable? Their behavior tells us all these things. They don't need to describe themselves to us. We can see it for ourselves. We can see what people do. And character is revealed under pressure. So when our story puts pressure on the hero by throwing a tough test at them, by putting them in a situation that is very frightening or difficult or challenging or requires them to be super clever, we watch what they do, and what they do reveals them to us. They may, at a certain point, have a change of appearance. How many characters in wonderful Shakespeare plays at a certain point say, "I know, I'll dress up as a boy." I'll put on a costume. I'll pretend to be someone else, Those external manifestations of somebody trying on a new identity are very powerful in storytelling. In one of our go-to examples, which I love, and I know many of you know well, in The Hobbit, there's changes in Bilbo's appearance as he goes through his adventure. He acquires at one point a sort of little suit of armor that is just his size, and then there's the moment when he's given a dagger. And at the midpoint of The Hobbit, that little sword that he has, a little Hobbit-sized sword, is the one thing that he uses when he is left alone to defeat these horrible, large, vicious spiders. And it is after he's really finish this transformative experience of all alone being a warrior. Like up until now, he's kind of been the brains of the outfit in a way. But this time he gets into a fight. He gets into a knife fight with monsters, these spiders, and he prevails. It's a total transformation that happens at the midpoint of The Hobbit. And it's that point that, kind of like the old cowboy movies where the fast draw guys blows the smoke off the end of the pistol and puts it back in the holster. After it's done, Bilbo takes this sword that he's just done real damage with, and he wipes the spider blood off it, because he's still a hobbit and he's very tidy. And he says, I think I shall call you Sting. I shall name you Sting. So now he's a guy who has a sword, and his sword has a name. He's like a knight. He's knighted himself in this moment, right? He's elevated his own status. It's how he feels on the inside. But good storytelling doesn't just narrate the inner state. It doesn't say, well, and Bilbo really felt amazing after he killed those spiders. A good storyteller will find a way to make a scene out of it, to make an action, to use dialogue, a change of appearance, the acquisition of a special object. A good storyteller will always be looking for ways to make manifest the internal journey of transformation. Now, if a storyteller fails to do this, if a storyteller gets so locked into the inner life of the character, and that they just forget to invent external proof of change, what happens then is you end up with a manuscript that is just almost feels like a monologue. Even if it's written in the third person, it just dwells within the mind of the hero to such an extent that pages and pages can go by, and the writer clearly has not noticed that nothing has happened, that this is all inner debate. But trust me, my friends, the reader will notice. The reader is waiting for something to happen. And many times when we write a draft, our messy mud pie, it's perfect, doing its job, because its only job is to exist. Doesn't have to be any good. Our exploratory early draft, we may veer, it may be our temperament to veer toward writing a lot of inner life. And if that's our nature, if that's our tendency as a writer, then when we go back to revise, what we have to remind ourselves to do, put a Post-it note on your computer screen, right, is to invent what happens. It can be so simple. It can be it can be a wonderful moment like Bilbo, cleaning the blood off the sword and saying, I shall name you Sting. It just shows us everything about how significant this moment is. So it could be something like that. It can be this wonderful moment that I absolutely love at the very opening of Charlotte's Web, when Fern, the human protagonist who starts the story, she has the mask of hero on as the book Charlotte's Web begins. And the first thing that happens, of course, is that she sees her father walking through the kitchen carrying an axe. And the first line of the book is, where's Papa going with that axe? It's breakfast. Her mother's serving the food. And that's how the book begins. And as soon as her mother answers the question truthfully, well, there was a runt piglet born last night. He's going to go out to kill it. Fern gets dreadfully upset, and immediately that invitation to adventure immediately wakens up a tremendous passion in her to try to save the pig. And the whole time that there's, this is an upset child in the kitchen. Those of us who have had children, what I'm talking about. This is an almost 8-year-old who's having a huge crying, very upset fit, raised voices. She doesn't like it. She pushes away from the table. She's quite upset. And during the scene, Fern's mother has a pitcher of milk in her hand, and she just pours the milk into a glass calmly and places it on the table. Is Fern's mother in the same emotional state as Fern? Clearly not. The superb storytelling of E.B. White knows that he doesn't have to go in to the narration and tell the reader Fern's mother felt very differently about this. Fern's mother was calm. She was not nearly as upset as her daughter. He said, no, there's none of that. None of that going on. All he does is invent the physical behavior of a farm wife calmly pouring a pitcher of milk into and putting the pitcher down on the table. So one of the things that you quickly discover when we talk about this dance of the internal transformation manifesting in externals, behavior, dialogue, appearance, setting, what is said about the hero, all of these markers that the reader can have access to, is that the old adage about writing craft, which is to show, not tell, is part of this. When we do a good job of creating external behavior, dialogue, setting, appearance, all of this stuff, when we do a good job of inventing the particulars of all of that stuff that the reader can see, then we have a much less need to tell the reader anything, because the reader is smart. And the reader can intuit, just as we in life can intuit from people's behavior, their speech, their appearance, their choices they make, what is said about them. We can intuit everything we need to know to have an opinion of that person. We don't need to then say also, but please tell me everything about you. We can see for ourselves. And so the invention of the physical manifestation of transformation leads us into really good writing craft, because the more that we can show and not tell, the more vividly our reader experiences the story. Because guess what? They're just like us. They'll believe it when they see it. They don't need for us to tell them all the inner importance of the story. They don't need for us to lay it out explicitly on a, inner monologue that never ends. If we show them the same things that are more than sufficient in life to show us the true nature of what's going on around us, they'll see it too. They'll see it for themselves, and they'll believe it because they saw it for themselves. They can trust their own judgment about it. So now you see how interesting this journey of change is, right? It's so important that we delineate it in stuff, like we provide evidence of it, not just once, not just at the end, where we take off the cover of the platter and say, voila, look, the Thanksgiving turkey is ready. No, we can't keep it under wraps. We have to show it scene after scene after scene, and it is incremental because people don't change all at once. We can go right back to our YouTube beauty makeover comparison, and it doesn't happen all at once. It is a whole long day in the salon, right? They've got to do the haircut, the color, the trim, the blowout, the styling, the makeup, the clothes. I mean, it just takes all day. That is it. That's the full story of the personal transformation. The person shows up in one state of being, and through a lot of incremental change, overcoming their own refusals, threshold guardians, allowing themselves to be guided by mentorship, even though they're probably pretty nervous at points, confronting all of the emotions that are going to come up. And then at the end, having to deal with both the joy and the shock and the complexity of letting go of an old identity. I mean, there may even be a little bit of grief involved, right? Like when you get to the end of a journey of transformation like that, isn't there sometimes also a sense of, why did I let myself stay stuck for so long? And then you have to mourn the time lost. And that, so there's always complexity. There's always complexity in human beings. And since we are human storytellers, most of us, my cat is listening, but has yet to write a story that I know of, at least in a form that I have been able to read. Um, Everything we write is about the human condition. And when we talk about change, we're talking about humans going through changes in a way that is relatable and profound and meaningful and satisfying to our human readers. So all of it is hooked up together. Let me take a moment to check any questions or comments if you guys have. Uh, Terry's here. Hey, Terry, it's great to see you. All this hair cutting talk is giving me hives. Listen, I hope that it's not a bad thing. I hope it's not just that you need a haircut. I'll tell you one thing though. During the pandemic, one of the things that was really a real struggle for a lot of people were if you were in a community where the hair salons and the gyms were shut, these seem to be the things that have dismayed people the most in a way. And it's the one that I hear people complain about the most. Maybe your experience is different, and I'll just speak for myself. But you have to recognize that those are things that are identity based, right? If we have a sense of ourselves, and if we can't get if we're used to coloring our hair so the gray doesn't show, and all of a sudden we're not able to do that anymore, it's not just an inconvenience, is it? It starts to make us deeply uneasy because it changes how we are seen by the world. It changes how we see ourselves. The change in the external presentation is not trivial. It actually goes right to our sense of who we are. It is very upsetting. Same with people that really, work out. They're maintaining a physique. Working out is great for your health, and it's not that, but sometimes people who work out consistently are maintaining a kind of appearance, a body composition that has come to be part of their identity. If you take that away from them, it's not just like, I'll take a little time off, I'll get back to the gym later. It's not, because what's going to happen in between, their appearance is going to change. The internal shift and the external shift are linked. So if you change the external, internally there is a great tumult. So it's not only you, Terry, who gets hives, at the thought of not of getting a haircut, not getting a haircut, whichever it is, it's change. It's change, and change has with it the full package of story energy. Story is change, and change happens according to the shape of story, with all of these stages, all of these energies that we've been talking about week after week. I find it so fascinating. I hope you do too. A new question from Rosin. Let's put it up. Rosin asks, how much does change involve overcoming fears, sometimes of what happens externally or of things in the character? Oh, I think there's a great deal of having to overcome fears, and not only fears, all kinds of internal obstacles in order for change to happen. It's a fruitful thing, Rosalind, and thank you for this great question. It's a fruitful thing to ask yourself as you contemplate your hero and get to know your main character well, as you will when you write a whole adventure for them. You're going to know them so well. Is fear one of the things that holds them back? And if it is, great. And then what are the other things? Because fear is just one of those emotions that what are the thoughts behind the fear? Granted, we are all, hardwired. Our nervous systems are wired for survival. So we will naturally feel fear in situations that are threatening, that are dangerous. We don't have to have limiting beliefs or, weird ideas or stuff we were taught during our upbringings in order to feel fear in a truly dangerous situation. Our nervous system will take care of that. But the minute we have an emotion, our minds tend to add some storytelling to it. So what is the story that your hero is telling themselves about their emotional lives? Fear is not the only thing that holds people back, of course. Sometimes Some people are just filled with resentment, right? Some people are envious. They have a chip on their shoulders, which probably came from somewhere, and that's will be part of their story too. It's not so much that they're afraid, but that they exist in a state of, uh, kind of cynicism. Why try things? Because the people who get ahead are, they're all crooks, and money's the root of all evil, and this, that, and the other thing. It's not possible. Nobody can really get published. It's impossible to get an agent. All these things, beliefs that people have, right? That are kind of based in just not trusting that the world works at all, right? They don't really think they have any agency. They don't think that they have really much control over their own fates. And when they see people who have what they kind of secretly or not so secretly want, there's a lot of resentment and bitterness. And that's like another psychology. I wouldn't call it fear necessarily, but it's another psychology that can hold people back. Is sometimes people just are naive, and they've been taught things that aren't true about what's possible in the world, and then evidence comes to contradict that. And all of a sudden they're like, what? You mean that's a thing that a person can dream of? Oh, and then they've got to kind of get over maybe an environment that's not conducive, that doesn't hold that belief. So overcoming fears is always something that we all go through, we all have to do, but it's important not to just say, well, she's afraid, and that my story is that she's afraid and she's going to learn not to be afraid. You will find that is insufficiently detailed to build a story on. If you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure you do, Rosalind. That's not enough, because everybody's afraid of something. We're all afraid of the unknown. Then the unknown becomes familiar to us, and then we become afraid of something else. So fear is not like a thing. Fear is it's a moment in time when we're confronted with something that triggers something in us, whether it is a true survival-based fear, whether it is a sense of the unknown, whether it's something that, activates something that we've been taught, or whatever limiting belief is holding us back. So it's a great question. I'm going to put here. Oh, and I just noticed you have a follow-up, Rouse, and I'll get to that in a second. Hey, Paul, great to see you here. Okay, generally speaking, when does the change really happen in a story? Of course, it's gradual. But is there a general point? It tends to occur most dramatically. So Paul, this is one of the things that I'm talking about today, is the change is ongoing. The change begins on the first sentence, and it doesn't end, until the story is done. So it's not our job to build an 80,000 word container for change that only takes 2,000 words to happen. If we build an 80,000 word container, a full-length novel, then that is 80,000 words of storytelling. So the question is where, how I would revise your question is, when is the change fully exposed? When is it fully tested? When is it really demonstrated? The extent of the change, when is it most fully demonstrated? Yeah. So you see the slight difference in the wording between how I'm recasting your question. It's not when does the change really happen. It's when does the full manifestation of this change come to the fore in our storytelling. It's a little bit different. And the answer to that version of what you're asking is absolutely in the third act. When we get to the third act of a story, this is when all of the change that your hero has been through for the entire narrative is all put to the test. So if you are, there's the Karate Kid, there's, whatever sport metaphors are good. Like, I'll use tennis because we just had the Australian Open, I think. If you are a tennis player and you started as a kid and you had a coach, you outgrew that coach, you got another coach, you practiced, you competed in tournaments, It takes years of training, and you finally get to one of the big matches. It's the change doesn't happen in the match. The change in your ability to play tennis does not happen during the US Open. But that is where it is most dramatically demonstrated. The sum of all of the change between you as a kid, the first time you picked up a tennis racket, and all the hours of practice and all the, you know, sore muscles and disappointments and triumphs and fatigue and perseverance and all of those things. That's where the change happens, Paul. But it is this final culminating demonstration that tends to occupy the third act of a story, where we get to really see it all at once. So hopefully that answer clarifies a little bit what you're asking. I'm going to put this up. So you're asking another question. Does it vary when it's exposed in the third act, beginning or somewhere in the middle? Does it start the third act or drive it or end it? Does it matter? Okay, the third act is short. So just remember that the beginning of the tale is like 25% of the length. The third act is 25%, and the middle is maybe 50%. Again, these are not formulas, but just proportions, like rough proportions. So when you say, is it the beginning of the third act or the middle of the third act or the end of the third act, the third act is going to fly right by. What you're typically going to do in a third act, I'll just say this quickly because we need to do a whole talk about third acts, don't we? But what you're typically going to do in a third act, Paul, is you're going to have a big scene. We call it the ordeal in story structure lingo. We call it the ordeal, and it's at the end of the second act. And that is the scene that you promised the reader when you set this hero on an adventure at the beginning of the second act. It was like, what's going to happen? Bilbo's going to get to the Lonely Mountain, the dragons steal the gold. That's the scene that was promised. That's the ordeal. That's what the reader's been expecting all along. And what happens is that we get to the ordeal, and it doesn't go as the hero expects. It has an unexpected outcome. It has unforeseen consequences. It spins the story into a wildly unexpected direction, and the stakes are now much higher. So when Bilbo goes in and steals the gold from the dragon, he's trying to do what he said he was going to do. Was his intention to make the dragon so furious that the dragon flies out and scorches, these incredible aerial runs of firebombing over the local town, kills thousands of people? And no, but none of that was Bilbo's intention. Was it his intention that, thanks to a heroic intervention from a man named Bard, who had some special qualities, he was able to, thanks to Bilbo's clever investigation and a little bird who acts as the herald who transmits this information to Bard, Bard now knows exactly where to shoot the arrow, the only place on the dragon's body that it can pierce that armor. And he knows this information thanks to Bilbo. This is a reward for a test that Bilbo succeeded in a little while ago. The dragon is dead. Ding dong, the dragon's dead. Is the story over? No. Because why? We're in the third act. When things happen, they have unexpected consequences. Now the true meaning of the story is revealed. The minute the dragon is dead, we realize that that's the outer manifestation of the dragon. The inner dragon is greed, and it's in everybody. And now all of a sudden, there's no one guarding the gold, and you've got 5 different armies marching from 5 different places, and all of them want it. It is a big, massive war. Did Bilbo intend for that to happen? No. These are all the unintended consequences of him doing what he set out to do at the very beginning of the second act, which was to get into that dragon's lair, steal the gold, and get out. So what is the third act of The Hobbit? It's that and Bilbo fixing it. It's the unintended mess that is made that are the direct consequences of the hero's ordeal, and now the hero's got to fix it. All right. So it's all of it. It's also, yeah, that is exactly what your third act does all the way through. But that's how I would structure a third act, Paul. All right. So that's it. We'll have a whole discussion about third acts. I think it's a great thing to talk about. But just to give you a quick answer to your question. All right, let me go back to Rosalind, who has one last follow-up about our earlier conversation about the hero's fear and whether fear is one of the big things that heroes have to get over. And here you're clarifying, Rosalind, a character's fears of their own weaknesses or other qualities. So if a character is afraid of their own weakness, do you mean that they lack confidence, that they believe themselves to be weak? If a character believes themselves to be weak, then learning that that's not so is very likely to be part of what they have to overcome. But I know, how much change is possible, right? Our theme today is that a story is change. And how much change is possible for a character who does not believe they are capable of change? This is the question I throw back at you, Rosalind, just to think about. If a character is afraid or has a limiting belief that they themselves are weak and are unable to change, how are you going to get this story started? There is an answer to that question. You've got to keep your hero in the first act. You've got to give them the experience that they need to drop the limiting belief that change is impossible. That's what you've got to do. You've got to create a strong enough counterforce that gets them over, whether it's through mentorship, whether it's through an incredibly strong motive, whether it's through the application of tremendous pressure of a threat of a negative consequence if they don't change. Think of the person who has a little house, right, in a suburb, and years go by and the city grows and the suburb gets eaten up by the city, and they want to keep their little house. And so what started out as a little house in a little suburb of little houses ends up as one of those infamous real estate holdouts. We've all seen them, where you've got some tiny little house that's got, gigantic office buildings next to it. Like it's now living in the cold shadow of being in the alley, of being sandwiched between giant structures. That person wanted to keep their house and they kept it, but they didn't really keep it, did they? Because everything else has changed, and chances are it's not really a fun place to live anymore. So sometimes we see our hero in a state of stuckness that is very dear to them, and that waking them up is one of the first things that we have to do. We have to find a way in our story. What happens in the story is designed to wake them up. That is what a first act is designed to do, Rosalind. That is its actual purpose, is to introduce your hero and get them into a situation where the freight train of change is bearing down on them in a way that, despite their fears, limiting beliefs, refusal of the call, threshold guardians, despite a great deal of that, their destiny is not going to take no for an answer. They will be whisked by a tornado to Oz, whether they like it or not. You will find a way to do it. That is what a first act does. That is precisely the job. So I'm wondering if I answered your question. Sometimes people ask me a question that's really specific, and I start to feel, oh, you've got something very particular in mind. Maybe there's a character that you're working with, or you have a work in progress that has this particular issue going on. And so I find myself answering a very particular question in an abstract way. And I don't know if it solves your problem, because we're not, maybe you've got more that I don't know. But, and so if that's the case, we can carry on this conversation in the Facebook group if you like. I'm happy to do that. But for right now, let me just leave it at that your hero is there for the makeover. They've shown up to shift their identity. Their need to do it is known to them to some extent. It might be known to the world to some extent. The extent to which they know it is up to you. That's the character you're designing. They may be almost completely oblivious that things need to change, but the reader must know. You have to put the signs of it where the reader can see them. We need to be rooting for this makeover to be successful. And that means we need to be fully invested in how it's not good enough. This, person, open-hearted, well-meaning person can show up saying, I know I haven't changed my look in 20 years. My kids say, come on, Ma, liven up, you can do better. Come on. I'm like, I don't know. Okay. I've just come to please them or whatever. Like, your hero can be pretty resistant. Your hero can be in a state of like, this isn't really my idea. But the thing is that it is needed. It's got to be needed. There has to be a need for it. If there isn't a big need for it, the stakes are too low. Because if change doesn't happen, everything's fine. If it happens, everything's fine. If it doesn't happen, everything's fine. Those are not the stakes of a good story. You've got to find a way to make those stakes extreme. The adventure must happen. Your hero cannot go on like this any longer. That's the job of the first act. And all of the obstacles that come in the way, whether they be fear or other qualities, they are there to be revealed to the reader so that we can be even more impressed, even more on board the hero's journey, even rooting for them even more that they succeed, because we see how much it's needed. We see how necessary it is. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for the great discussion, the great questions. I love the interaction. It's always a treat. We will continue these on Wednesdays to come. I think we've got a great plan to maybe have a discussion of third acts. If you guys like that topic, let me know in the comments. If you have other topics that you would like for me to talk about, let me know in the comments. I love to hear what you are thinking about, what you're interested in, and what can really be of most benefit to your writing. Okay, I wish all of you a beautiful beauty makeover on the inside or the outside, a decluttered closet, some evidence of transformation between now and the next time we meet. And I would love to know what it's going to be. So maybe you'll tell me next time. All right. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.